T-Wolves bounce back strong. They beat the Nets tonight 101-86. I got the expert Jack Borman. He's going to help us break it all down, and it's all coming up next on the Locked On Wolves POSTCAST.
You are Locked On Wolves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up? What's up? Back in the lab, back at it. Another T-Wolves POSTCAST episode right here on the Locked On Sports Minnesota Network. You got myself, Luke Inman, at Luke_Spinman. That's the man. He's Jack Borman. He's on Twitter, at JRBorman13. And Jack, before we jump into all the action tonight, quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, man. Wolves still trying to shake off that All-Star break rust, perhaps, coming off a tough loss to the Bucks just 24 hours prior. They come into this one. They're trying to build some new momentum again. Because remember, this was one of the hottest teams in the NBA the last 10 or so days before the break, beating the Clippers, beating the Bucks by both substantial margins. And, oh, yeah, you're going to have to do it tonight without Rudy Gobert as well because he sat this one out. He needed some rest. And all in all, Jack, I'd say this was a pretty close one. I mean, the box score probably doesn't do it justice. Back and forth for most of the night until a 9-0 run late in the fourth quarter. Wolves do hold on. They win it 101-86. So kick us off here, Jack. What were your top 2 or 3 biggest observations from this one?
Yeah, it's got to be the defense, right? I think, for the Timberwolves tonight, season low 86 points allowed. Their defensive rating was also 86, which is a season best. Season low 33.7% shooting allowed. Season low 17% 3-point percentage allowed. Season low tying 6 3-point made allowed. And they held Brooklyn to just 53% at the rim. And the league average is 66 there. So that's pretty impressive for them playing without Rudy Gobert. And then beyond that, I think that the way that Karl-Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards were able to respond and put together a couple of pretty big quarters in that, especially in that fourth quarter, they were really productive in that fourth quarter, combined for 18 points, which is exactly what you want from your 2 stars down the stretch. And then outside of that, for me, I was really impressed with the way that, the Timberwolves just kind of kept their composure throughout this whole game, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a game where both teams, it's ugly. Jim Pete said it's not going to go in the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. And right. I think it's
probably not going to see this one on ESPN Classic in 10 years. I'm just
might want to burn the tape of this one.
Right.
I think the biggest thing for the Timberwolves is that when they kind of get down in the mud and drag these teams down with them, they have more offensive talent than most of the teams that they're dragging down into the mud. And 1 or 2 shots for the Timberwolves to just pull ahead in those types of games. And they've really done a great job all season long of being able to conjure up those two or 3 big shots that can take it from a 1 or 2 point game to a 7 or an 8 point game pretty quickly. And you saw Jaden McDaniels was able to do that in the fourth quarter with a pair of threes, which was impressive after he got benched for a lack of effort early in that third quarter. You have to be pleased with the way he responded and then stood up for Mike Conley at the end of the ball game there. So really just a nice win for the Timberwolves. Definitely a no pictures on the scorecard type of win, and one that I think is just a morale boosting win, even though this one wasn't pretty. I think just to be able to say, hey, we got to win. We can put that Milwaukee game behind us. Maybe a little bit of an aberration offensively in that game, for Mike Conley to be off, Cat to be off shooting the way that he was. I think just be able to put that one behind you and see a W in the win column after tonight is pretty important.
Yeah, Wolves moved to 5-2 in game 2s of their back-to-backs now this year. They hit the 40-win mark. They're 40-17, which 40 wins, man, no matter how you slice it, despite all the ups and downs, a couple roller coasters in there. When I think back to a lot of people's, and I'm talking NBA experts too, right? National media, the preseason projections, to have 40 wins right now with 25 games to play, some quick math, that's pretty wild, man. That's pretty wild. I'll just say that. I didn't know Rudy wasn't playing until I flipped on the pregame show, by the way. So that was a big surprise. I was worried about, the paint play, obviously, especially knowing the Nets, as bad as the Nets are. They're a top 10 team in rebounds this year. But regardless, Slow-Mo gets the nod for Rudy tonight. I know you mentioned that. And I think I'm most curious about what you thought looked the most different without him on the floor, outside of the obvious stuff. And then what still maybe looked the same, at its core, when you think about Minnesota Timberwolves basketball and what their identity has been this year, what still looked the same in that fashion, despite no Rudy Gobert?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me that looked differently was their offense, right? In the Nets are a team that like to switch everything 1 through 5. I mean, as far as defensive trios in the league go, you can't get a whole lot better than Nick Claxton as your anchor with Ben Simmons and Mikal Bridges on the perimeter. Those are two of the best perimeter defenders, overall defenders in the entire NBA. And then, to get Claxton back is pretty big. So, all those guys on the Nets and their starting lineup do a really good job, outside of Cam Thomas, do a really good job of keeping their guy in front of them. The handoff switches really well. And that's something where Rudy Gobert's screen setting makes a huge difference, and that he can give guys like Anthony Edwards, even Karl Anthony Towns, Jaden McDaniels, even Mike Conley too, to get into the mid-range, all that runway to be able to create in the mid-range or get all the way to the rim and collapse the whole defense and get the ball kicked out to the perimeter so they can swing it around a bunch of different times. And they didn't have that tonight. And I thought I really liked that Finch started Kyle Anderson instead of Naz Reid, especially with the way that Naz has been struggling a little bit, and be able to control his minutes and who he plays with more off the bench. But Kyle Anderson initiated more of the offense up top in the key, and he played more out of the corner. We saw him shoot a couple of corner threes. Neither of which looked good at all. And I thought that they would use Kyle Anderson as a handoff guy as well to counteract more of that, lack of spacing that he brings from being in the corner when his guy just sags down in the paint. And they didn't do that as much. And, I think that's a fair comment as to why Kyle plays out of the corner much. I think, you see it with the Warriors all the time, where Draymond Green is super active as a screener and is in the handoff game. And the Warriors do that because if you're going to play off the guy, then there's nobody to be right there when Steph Curry or Klay Thompson comes flying around the screen or flying around the handoff to shoot a three, right? And so the Wolves really missed that tonight, I thought. And that's part of the reason why they struggled. And then when you consider that they played a team in Brooklyn that's a really good switching team, it's just going to lead to more isolations. And this number hasn't updated since the game was over, but entering the fourth quarter, the Timberwolves just averaged 0.813 points per possessions on isolations. That's an 81 offensive rating. That's pretty bad. So for context, the league average on ISOs is about 0.95 points per possession, or about a 95 offensive rating. And the Wolves are about 98.5 offensive rating on isolations this season. So it was an off night for them, even in isolation. But, I think you still got to, tip your cap to the Wolves, the way that they were able to gang rebound without Rudy Gobert. They still gave up 16 offensive rebounds, 16 second chance points, but Cat, Slow-Mo, Naz all have 9 rebounds. Ant has 8. And I really thought they, again, missed Rudy Gobert on the offensive glass too. His activity, even when Rudy doesn't get offensive rebounds, he does an awesome job of just making the rebounds tougher for opponents. And when that happens, it can slow down the transition game. And but the Wolves only 6 offensive rebounds tonight, 3 below their average. And those only rebounding 6 of their 46 live ball misses. So shots that come off the rim that don't end up out of bounds. Only 13% of them they got an offensive rebound on. That's less than half of what their average is right around 28%. So I thought that, again, the Wolves did a great job on defense, flying around and covering for each other. I thought their activity on the interior was phenomenal. Again, holding Brooklyn to 53% at the rim. The league average there is 66%. So that's a really, really strong mark against a Brooklyn team that's not a great finishing team at the rim, but is one that has capable guys. And for the Wolves to be able to, again, put forth their best defensive effort of the season without Rudy Gobert, I think says a lot about the way that they're able to cover for each other, the way that they're able to, just kind of play this next man up mentality. And it wasn't a game where Jaden McDaniels was all that impactful defensively either. It wasn't one of those where you can say like, wow, Jaden was just all over the place tonight and was incredible. I think it was more of just every guy playing 5% better or 10% better at what they're doing in their role. And I thought, again, when you have Naz and Karl both in there underneath the rim, banging on the glass and flying around for rebounds. And I thought the guards did a great job of crashing down to try and get rebounds as well, which was great. I mean, Nickeil Alexander, 6 rebounds, Mike had 3, Monte Morris had 2, McLaughlin had 2 in just 4 minutes. So you got to give all those guys credit for the way that they kind of stepped up as a unit to try to make up for Rudy Gobert's absence.
Yeah, well said there. A lot of great nuggets in there. And I couldn't agree more. The stereotype is Rudy equals defense, which is obviously true. But you're right, man. They missed him on the offensive side of the ball just as much tonight. So bottom line, and maybe you reiterate something you already mentioned, but, I will say, just take a step back. It's still a long season. It's a grind. We got a gauntlet left to play, and a lot can and will happen. And knock on wood, I mean, this Wolves team, all in all, by and large, been really lucky with injuries and all that up to this point. But let's say someone like Rudy goes down late in the season, or God forbid, even the playoffs. I know it's a small sample size, but like, what's the biggest thing we learned tonight about this team, who got the win without one of their biggest key players? Because tonight, okay, it's the Nets, but come crunch time, when it matters more, the most, it's going to be a lot more talent on the other side of the ball, right?
Yeah, I think so for sure. I think the Wolves are just really going to have to lean into their offensive spacing, right? And you probably are going to keep Kyle Anderson out there for defensive purposes because he is still a really important defender. You could make an argument that he's been better defensively than Jaden McDaniels has been this year. I certainly would partake in that type of conversation. But I think the biggest thing is, how can you maintain your spacing with Karl and Naz and how where you place those guys when they aren't setting the screens. And I think Naz all season has done a great job playing out of the corner. And if he can do that really effectively, I think that'll be interesting. I think running 4-5 pick and roll with Kyle Anderson and Karl Anthony Towns would be an interesting experiment as well, just as another way to make sure that Kyle's not in the corner or in the slot. I think getting Kyle Anderson to cut, to set back screens for guys, kind of like Wolves fans saw what Jared Vanderbilt did a ton of, because Jared Vanderbilt is pretty similar to Kyle Anderson in terms of, the way that they create or spacing a little bit. And you remember Vando just set screens everywhere. He slipped screens, he cut, he was active on the offensive glass. I think just getting active a little bit more in all those areas would be great. And I think you saw too in the fourth quarter that when the Wolves do have that spacing working the right way, that Anthony Edwards can just get to the rim and really take control in one-on-one matchups where it's really tough for the defense to send a second defender towards him. And Ant's going to win those matchups, whether it be scoring or playmaking, taking advantage of that matchup to create for a teammate very well. And he did that in the fourth quarter. And so I think you saw a little bit there of how you can mitigate some of Rudy not being there and make up for it on the offensive end. I don't think that you can bank on a defensive performance like this consistently, especially in the playoffs with how much offensive talent there is in the Western Conference. But I do think that the Timberwolves can still find a way to, increase their offensive efficiency a little bit with the right lineups and getting Karl Anthony Towns to shoot more threes. Him shooting 4 of 8 from 3 was huge tonight and opened things up for everyone else trying to navigate and operate in the lane and cutting and driving and all those sorts of things.
Last one here real quick, but just some more box score scouting here, which I know doesn't always tell the whole story, but Ant leads the way, 29 points, 8 boards, 3 assists, 2 blocks and a steal. Cat with 28 and 9, Jaden with only 7, didn't come till the very end as well. Conley with 14, Slow-Mo, you mentioned 12 and 9 boards, Naz Reid with 6, Na with the goose egg, Monte Morris with 5, which I want to talk about Monte Morris here in the next segment, but you can take that any direction you want. I'm just wondering which other guy or two you think should get a little bit of attention for good or bad.
Yeah, I think it's Naz Reid. Unfortunately, Naz tonight, 6 points on 2 of 9 shooting, and then last night had 8 points on 2 of 10 shooting.
Yeah.
So you'd really hope that he can kind of find some momentum on the offensive end of the floor, just because they really need him. And he's been a super important player for the Timberwolves all season long. It's going to be even more important if Gobert misses another game or two. We have no idea what his status is going to be moving forward. So I think that's the one that stands out right away, because Nickeil was great last night. He had 13 points. I think he had 11 in the first half. And he's been really consistent in terms of at least being able to make 1 or 2 threes a night over the course of the last month, 6 weeks or so. And you just got to hope that Nas can pick it up until at least Monte Morris starts to feel a little bit more comfortable. I think we started to see signs of that tonight. We'll get into that after the break, but he's got to be able to produce more than 6 points, especially if he's going to play 27 minutes. And he knows that. And I thought he took a lot of good shots for the most part. I agreed with pretty much every 3-pointer that he took. He's not going to shoot 0 of 5 from 3 very often. Him and Nickeil aren't going to go 0 of 10 from 3 combined very often, or 2 of 15 from the floor. So I think you just got to hope that those two guys can rebound. And it's nice that we're able to say, hey, they've got to be able to produce more than 6 points on 2 of 15 shooting in a win, rather than, it being a loss like it was last night. And there was just inconsistent production up and down the lineup and the rotation. So we'll see. It's nice that all these guys are able to play at home, right? And that you have this prolonged home stretch. You can get in the facility. You can play with your routines a little bit, make sure you focus a little harder on some of those routines and some of the things that are able to make you successful over the course of the season, like we've seen from these two the whole entire first 2/3 of the season. So I've got a lot of confidence in both of those guys bouncing back, and you just kind of got to hope that playing at home will help them kind of build some momentum, and the fans will kind of breathe some confidence into those guys as they play. The Spurs on Tuesday and then the Grizzlies. So two really inferior opponents to them that they should absolutely beat before they play the Clippers and the Kings later on in this homestand, I believe.
All right, plenty more deep dive, including Monte Morris's new impact. That's all coming up right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's postcast brought to us by our friends over at Stitch Fix. Guys, sometimes the biggest cliches in life are cliches because they're true. And one of the best cliches that resonates with me the most is, if you look good, you feel good. Deion Sanders said it best. Look good, feel good, play good. You play good, they pay good. And I always feel my best when I use Stitch Fix, because with Stitch Fix, you get your own personal stylist who understands your style, your size, and most importantly, your budget. And the best part is, they do all the shopping for you. That makes it, without a doubt, the easiest way to update your wardrobe closet for the spring season. For me personally, I'm kind of into that sporty, laid back, kind of relaxed, casual look. The hoodies, the fleeces, the quarter zip ups, maybe a golf polo or two. So my personal stylist helped me find some new trendy clothes that fit my look and feel perfectly, and help me update my closet without those long, excruciating, stressful trips to the mall, because nobody's got time for all that. All you got to do, tell your stylist your size, your style, and your budget, and they'll take care of the rest. And my favorite part, there's no subscription required. You just order a new box how you want it, when you want it. And if you don't like it, no problem. Send it back on the house. Free shipping, free returns, free exchanges. It's style that makes you feel as good as you look. So get started today at stitchfix.com/lockedon. That's stitchfix.com/lockedon. What is it? It's stitchfix.com/lockedon. All right, my new favorite bit, I'm starting with you. It's the Monte Morris watch, okay? Because I just want to keep tabs on him, like how he's fitting in to the whole mix of things. What'd you like from him tonight? Are we still trending in the right direction with his fit here? And I guess, too, like, how long realistically until you think he gets fully acclimated and kind of up to speed where it's, it's not new anymore. His head's maybe not spinning, and it's just kind of another day at the office for him.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you that I would know, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know exactly what kind of physical shape he's in, or how long it's going to take for him to play himself into a full version of himself in terms of whether that's 20, 25 minutes. We just don't know how long he's going to be able to play, or what Chris Finch's plan is in terms of, hey, I want to get Monte Morris to that 25-minute mark that Naz Reid is playing right now. Maybe Naz goes back to 17, 18, something like that. But we'll see. I think for Monte Morris, I mean, he was involved in the Wolves' second best lineup tonight, which was that Monte, Nikhil, Ant, Naz, and Karl Anthony Towns lineup that we saw that was a +9 in just 3 minutes of play. But what I really liked about Monte Morris was his ability to create open 3-point looks tonight. 2 of his 4 assists were assisted to Mike Conley for 3-pointers, which is really important. But he probably, I really like looking at potential assist numbers as a kind of a method of looking at how good of a playmaker someone is, because you can't always control whether or not your teammates make it, right? Mm-hmm. And Monte Morris probably had 6 or 7 additional potential assists tonight that he didn't get, with 3 or 4 of those coming on wide open 3-point shots that he created, doing a great job playing off the catch, getting into the lane and kicking the ball out to open teammates. And I think he does a really good job of catching the ball and putting the ball on the deck with the intention of getting it to a specific player. And he knows how to manipulate the defense how he wants to in order to create that open passing lane and creating an open shot for a teammate, which is something that's really important. I think for a Timberwolves bench unit that has really struggled all year, we've talked about him giving you maybe 8 to 12 points at full strength every night. And that's going to be great. But I think too, he should be able to create easier looks for guys like Naz and Nikhil, especially, who do a lot of their work scoring off the bench and spot up 3-point opportunities. And then the other part too is both of those guys are capable of attacking off the catch, right? If the defense is getting over aggressive closing out, those guys are really effective at putting the ball on the deck and either scoring or then, creating another open look from 3 in a corner kick out situation or something like that. And so Monte was great there. I feel really good about his shot selection. You can tell that he's been pretty demonstrative in calling for the ball when he's been open from beyond the arc. And I think as he continues to make more of those 3-point shots again tonight, what was he tonight? He was 1 of 3. Mm-hmm. So again, you want to be able to see him maybe get a couple more up, make a couple more. But again, I think the 3-point shooting is the biggest beneficiary we'll see of him playing his way into more of game shape. They said on the broadcast that Monte stayed in Minneapolis during the entirety of the AllStar break to continue working on his conditioning and his game and getting to know this team a little bit better, which I think is important in a nice veteran, really great work ethic move from him, which is what you want to see. And so I think the more that Monte gets comfortable as a scorer, especially, and guys understand where he likes to get the ball as a scorer, I think that we'll start to see him score more than 3, 4, 5, 6 points a game. And I think fans saw it tonight. I've seen some comments in the chat here as well that Monte Morris is just a really smart connective piece, right? He does a great job of making the extra pass. He does a great job of kind of knowing when to attack off the dribble and when to kind of get off of it and just play, get off the ball early, and then, be an off-ball player that does a good job of kind of flowing into empty space and maintaining spacing. He's not a guy that's going to screw up the spacing on the floor very often. And again, I think Monte Morris is another guy that's going to be able to play with Rudy Gobert really effectively, not necessarily because he's a good lob thrower or things like that. He hasn't really played with a whole lot of lob threats throughout his career, but he's a really effective mid-range scorer. And so when Rudy can set those screens, it can open up, 5, 7, 8, 10 feet of space, whatever it is, for that guard coming downhill. I think Monte is going to take 2 or 3 of those shots every single game. And I think Chris Finch will want him to, because those could be 6, 8 points that are really important for the Wolves over the course of a game. And the other thing too, that I want to note here really quickly is that Mike Conley, again, signing that contract extension, 2 years, $21 million. I think that's going to unlock the potential to bring Monte Morris back this summer. I think we've talked a lot since the Wolves acquired him, is that this might be a 1-year rental type of situation. But if the Timberwolves go deep in the playoffs and the ownership group is committed to paying a luxury tax bill that, if they brought Monte Morris back, could push $70 million, I think, depending whether that's a $5 million, $8 million, whatever the number ends up being. But I think that could be really important. And I think that's going to also depend on too how quickly he's able to get assimilated here over the course of this homestand and then down the stretch of the regular season, especially those last 15 games with 10 of the final 14 being at home. Those are all going to be really important as we kind of know where teams are starting to fall a little bit more in the pecking order in terms of the probabilities of what seed each team is going to get. So I think it's just going to be really fun. Again, I think Monte Morris, having him and Mike Conley both on the floor at the same time to start the fourth quarter has to make you feel pretty safe.
Yeah.
And overall, I've just liked the lineups that Chris Finch has played him in so far. I think he's played him in lineups that can provide a lot of spacing so that guys can drive and take advantage of that spacing and then kick it out to guys like Morris for open corner threes. I think will be important to see as well. So I agree with that last comment about Slow-Mo maybe not being back just as a luxury tax casualty. But yeah, fun to see Monte Morris get a little bit of run and hopefully that continues. But again, even when he's not scoring 4 assists, 0 turnovers, probably could add 7 or 8 assists, like I said. So nice step in the right direction for him. And hopefully he continues to make those pesky defensive plays as well. He's been really competitive on that end, which has been fun to see. He had a block and a steal tonight again to continue to add to that defensive activity that he's shown in his first 5-6 games here in Minnesota.
Yeah, he's been a lot of fun to watch, man. And we'll continue our Monte Morris watch as the season goes on. All right, we got one quick segment left. We'll talk about the Wolves' remaining homestand schedule on deck, and that's all coming up right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to you by LinkedIn. All right, guys, when you start hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the job, right? Well, then LinkedIn Jobs is a no-brainer because LinkedIn Jobs has the tools you need to help find the right professionals for your team faster, and it's for free. Now, I know when it comes to hiring, there's so many options to choose from, but LinkedIn isn't just another job board. It's the only job board because they've got the biggest network to choose from with more than 1 billion professionals. And that's what makes LinkedIn the best and only place to hire, because at the end of the day, LinkedIn is going to give you access to professionals you just can't find anywhere else. And they do all that while also making the process easy and intuitive. Think about it. Hiring for your next job is going to be easy when you have hundreds of quality candidates, right? So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate match within just 24 hours. So it's time to join the 2.5 million small businesses that are already using LinkedIn for hiring. Try it today. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. LinkedIn. Terms and conditions apply. Okay, Wolves had that nice long break here. Hey, what'd you think about the All-Star week, by the way? I mean, the game, Towns in the three-point contest, and then you see Lillard last night. He won it, obviously, but then he lights it up versus us. Highest scoring All-Star game ever. Did you like what you saw? Maybe a little something left to be desired, maybe, because I know a lot of people are talking about it's kind of weak, I guess, and something maybe needs to be changed moving forward. I'm just curious, your quick thoughts.
Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot of strong thoughts. I can tell you that right now. I think the All-Star game has become what it's become. It is what it is. I'm not, frustrated by the lack of effort. I understand why we've gotten to this point, just with guys not wanting to get hurt and things like that. So it is what it is. I think you would wish that Ant maybe took it a little bit more seriously, in the sense that he admitted last night that he was really out of shape in that game against Milwaukee, and the lack of activity, at least be a little bit more active, I guess. But it is what it is. I think 3-point contest has become the best event at All-Star weekend, just because all those guys obviously are going 100%. All those guys are trying. And I think there have been some interesting points about, the All-Star game is an opportunity to draw more eyeballs to the NBA and viewership. And if the All-Star game really falls off in terms of all the ad revenue around it, that lowers the, total basketball related income number that is used to determine the salary cap. And a lot of player salaries are tied to the salary cap as a percentage of the cap. So if the players are taking this seriously, the stars are the one who that basketball related income number and salary cap lowering would impact the most, right? So there's that element of it. But again, I think this is something that people are really going to talk about for 5-10 days at most. And then everyone's going to forget about it until next year. I think, yes, in some instances, an all-star break is fun to be able to showcase all the talent in the league.
Yeah.
But and Ben Beacon made a great point too on the basketball party this week, that if you go back and look at some of the all-star games in the 80s and 90s, there were scores in the 130s and 140s for each team. And so it's not like they were, just mugging each other and playing really tough defense. I think there was probably some more prolonged stretches of tougher defense, but I mean, come on. I think my one thing is bring back the Elam ending. I thought that fourth quarter in 2020, right before I think that's what it was, 2020. Maybe it was 2021. I don't know. When they first did the Elam ending, that was a really fun fourth quarter. And those guys really got after it and played hard. So that, I think, was the best example in recent years of adding some more competitiveness to it. But again, I'm not going to get worked up about it. I thought Ant shooting left hand in the skills challenge was kind of funny. But, it is what it is, and was happy for Carl to be able to score 50 in that environment. I do feel bad for him. I feel like it was a little bit of a loss where if he doesn't take it seriously, everyone's like, oh, well, he's not taking it seriously.
Right.
And then
they bag on him. Yep.
And then if he scores 50, it's, oh, look at this try hard, big stats in a loss, just like he's done in Minnesota. So
what do you want from me, man?
Exactly.
What do you want?
Exactly.
Write a book, dude. What chapter is that in the book, dude? What do you want
cancer,
from me, man?
solve world hunger.
Figure it out, man. Yeah. All right. Last one here. You start out the gate with these 7 straight home games. Obviously lost last night. They win tonight. Good bounce back. What do you want to see, these next 5 home games from this team outside of the obvious, just win every game? Like, what second half of the season adjustments were you hoping to see that maybe you've already started to see take place versus, what adjustments are you still waiting for? Because, I mean, dude, call spade a spade. They better take advantage of 7 games in a row at home, because on the other side of it, you got 7 straight road games staring you in the face and a few back-to-backs in the mix on top of that.
Yeah, what I'm looking for is my number one key coming into the second half of the season was for Anthony Edwards to be able to continue some of the playmaking flashes that we saw from him in the last 4 games of the regular season before the All-Star break. He had 26 assists and only 4 turnovers, and it was like a 6.5 assist to turnover ratio, which is really important because I think a lot of people pointed the finger at Chris Finch, and understandably so, for the team's pretty inept fourth quarter offense during those stretches where we saw some fourth quarter collapses and things like that. But honestly, a lot of it came down to your 2 best players just being willing to move the basketball and put the ball on the deck to be able to create for their teammates and not just for themselves. And we really saw Anthony Edwards do a phenomenal job of doing that in those 4 games leading into the All-Star break. And then in the 2 games since then, he's had 8 assists and 4 turnovers. So obviously not as good as what you've seen from him in those previous 4 games. You still assist to turnover ratio north of 2 is pretty good for a guy with his usage rate, but I think you want to see him continue to get back to driving the lane to create for his teammates, especially in the corners. And then beyond that, the Timberwolves just shooting more threes, right? 38 3-point attempts tonight. That's a pretty decent number. I think you'd like to see that hover north of 40, especially if you can get Carl to shoot more threes. I mean, he's shooting damn near 45% from 3 this season. And if you just look at his points per shot number on the drive versus from beyond the arc, he's a much more efficient 3-point shooter than he is driver. I'm totally fine with Carl posting up. He's a really solid post-up player. And that's just another way that you can take advantage of putting smaller 4s on him. But Monte Morris should also help as another spot-up threat, like we talked about earlier tonight, being able to collapse the defense and kick the ball out to shooters. So I think it's those 2 things. It's Ant's playmaking as another way to make defenses pay for putting two on the ball or for putting smaller guys on him. And then just being able to shoot more threes, right? And then the third one for me is Kyle Anderson continuing to be effective. And Kyle Anderson was really, really good in those 3 games, I think, or 4 games after the trade deadline before the break. Played really efficient basketball as a playmaker. Also was providing, 6 in that 6 to 10 points range in just about every game. Was active on the glass. Was a playmaker defensively, getting getting his hands on passes in the passing lanes and creating transition opportunities. And then tonight, right, 12 points. That was pretty important on a night when the Timberwolves needed scoring anywhere that they could get it. For him playing 31 minutes. He had 2 assists really quickly, and you would have hoped that he could have been a little bit more impactful as a playmaker. But again, I think probably 2 or 3 of those drives that you'd normally see him pass and create a shot for other players, he was just scoring it himself. And you'll obviously take that every single time. So those 3 things, it's really all offensively focused for me. I think the defense is a pretty known commodity at this point, both on paper, but also in reality, in terms of how they've all played really, really hard. They've covered for each other. They've rebounded much better than they have last season. And they've just played in the gaps really well and made it really difficult to drive the lane and create open 3-point shots. They've rotated on the perimeter well to force teams to run teams off the line, take shots inside the arc in that 4 to 14 foot range that we've talked about all year on this show. So yeah, it's really just about the offense, and they trended pretty well. I think over the last 2 weeks heading into the All-Star break, they were a top 5 offense in the league. And so if they're able to replicate that, maybe not at that same top 5 level, but Chris Finch has done a great job in his career as Wolves coach of turning this offense around the second half of the season. And he's certainly on route to doing that again this season. It's just a matter of continuing to trend in the right direction on that side of the ball.
Quick reminder, go check out all of Jack's work on Twitter at JRBorman13. Make sure you check out the entire crew on the Minnesota Basketball Party. That's each and every Wednesday. Sam Ekstrom, Ron Johnson, Reggie Wilson, and Ben Beacon, always ripping it up over on the Locked On Wolves podcast each and every day as well. That'll do it for us tonight. He's Jack Borman. I'm Luke Inman on Twitter at Luke_Spinman. Until next time, signing out.